Okay, in this short video, I'm planning to go over some of the sort of fundamentals and sort of principles of using some of the basic hand tools within your workshop. Today's lesson is going to be a bit about your using the chisels and the kind of the main sort of things to think about before you start working with them. Hopefully by watching this video you'll get better at your chiseling, and in terms it will be improving your woodworking joints so that they're more accurate and more up to the National 5s and higher standards. Okay, so first principle to kind of remember is basically don't be an idiot. The chisels that you're working with are extremely sharp, all right? They are regularly sharpened by our technician on a weekly basis, okay? So they are extremely sharp on the edge here, all right? So a lot of times I can see in classes is people holding the material and they're chiseling towards their fingers. That's going to end up with a trip to hospital, all right? Or they're holding it and they're trying to get something taken care of by just pushing the chisel towards what they're working with. Anything like that is going to end up in an injury. Equally, if they're having it in the vise, all right, they tend to have this motion of putting their hand in front of what they're cutting with, and obviously that's going to end up potentially having some sort of injury, which we want to try and avoid. Okay, so when we are working with any sharp tools in the workshop, you have to kind of bear in mind where the sharp edge is off the tool and keep all fingers and digits away from that sharp edge. Okay, so if I'm chiseling this section out, I have both my hands behind the sharp end of the tool there, and I'm pushing it away from where I'm working. Okay, so the next principle I want to talk to you about in terms of your chiseling is your positioning, all right? Not only the position of your body, but also your position of your hands and how you're holding onto the chisel in correlation with your workpiece. As a school teacher, I see all kind of weird and wonderful things that people try and do in their times of chiseling, from standing up too tall and trying to chisel up here and they're not really seeing what they're looking at, from having the chisel that way and trying to hit back towards them, even down here like this, trying to chisel with the knee on the floor like that to try and chisel across that bit. Okay, having a good stance or positioning of your body will help you with your chiseling to be more accurate, but also just gives you a sense of more control with what you're working with. Okay, so in terms of standing in your position of your chisel, of your wood, sorry, is stand sideways. Stand side on, all right? A lot of people stand front like this and start jabbing away at their material. You get a lot more control if you stand side on, put a bit of weight into your back leg there, so you're kind of leaning forward, all right? You're leaning back from that leg there, and it allows you then just to push that forward, and you're allowing yourself just to lean into your material, all right? Standing up tall like this and jabbing away, you don't have the sense of control, okay? Having that leg split in front like that, side on, and then you can just work your way across, giving yourself a bit more control. Okay, so positioning of your body is quite a good thing. You want to try and duck down a little bit, so you're not standing up too tall, that way you can't really see what you're doing. Sort of crouch down a little bit, and that allows you to be a bit closer to your material so you can actually see what you're working with in terms of your chiseling. Okay, so now that you've got your body stance in the kind of correct manner or the correct position, it's about how you hold your chisel correctly as well. What I tend to see quite a lot is people's holding the chisel from way back here, the back end of the chisel, and as they're working, trying to get that there to work, it's just the struggle to try and get that to line up with where you want it to be, especially if you've got just a little kind of 0.5 millimeter or whatever to take off to get that last final cut to clean out your joint. It's difficult for you to try and line your chisel up. By the time you get it set up and then you try and hit it with a mallet, for instance, it may have shifted down below your line and you've taken too much off. Okay, so holding it back there isn't always the best idea. What you want to think about doing is holding it a bit further forward. All right, so you can either hold it underneath like so, or you can hold it on top. All right, but actually holding the metal part of the chisel gives you a lot more control. One, your hand is closer to the tip of the blade, the chisel, which means you're closer to your workpiece, but it means that you can actually have a bit more control about where you want to position your chisel because your hand is closer to where your workplace is going to be. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in a wee bit, that might help. All right, so having that there allows you to position your chisel exactly where you want it to be, and that can give you enough of your positioning to get that chiseled right through. Okay, so you're holding onto the chisel, just bring that back a bit. Holding onto the chisel towards the front of the chisel gives you a lot more control than holding it to the back of it. Equally, you can see there, when I do put my hand on top, not only am I wrapping my fingers around the blade there, but I'm using my thumb just to hold onto the edge there to give it a bit more control. Equally, if I was underneath like that, you can do the same thing from underneath. You can have it like that, same thing as up top there. So depending on how you want to hold it on top or holding it underneath, doesn't really matter. But the idea behind it is you want to hold it closer to the edge of your chisel point. When it comes to chiseling out your joints and things like that, is you don't want to chisel right the way through your project, because you end up with this kind of breakout at the end here where your bits of material will snap off the edge. Okay, so what can be quite a good thing to stop you from doing that is essentially if you place your fingers, if I want to clean this bottom of my joint out, for instance, what I could do is if I set my finger and my thumb together and kind of squeeze them together and lock them in position, that's going to set essentially a depth of how far in I want my chisel to go. All right, so I can actually use that there and have my hand on the actual vise. Gives me a bit of control that I can work that towards, and it gives me that sense that I'm not going to go all the way through my project. I'm taking little cuts at a time, making sure that I don't go beyond that kind of halfway mark that I'm setting for myself by using my thumb and my finger to squeeze that together. All right, you want to have, when it comes to chiseling, it's about finesse. It's about taking very small cuts off at a time. You don't want to take anything too big off. Potentially going to rip more fibers up than you need. Obviously, at this point, what I would do, turn my wood around, and I would come back from the other side, and I'd come back to meet the halfway point. Okay, so positioning of your body and positioning and grip of your tool is another fundamental that you need to remember when chiseling. Okay, another thing when it comes to positioning or grip of your tool is I have my through housing joint that I've got to cut in here, but I haven't managed to saw as close to my line as I wanted to, so I've got a wee bit of paring off to do to widen up my joint to the correct stance. Okay, so in terms of this, what I would want to do with that is chisel down into the material, and again, what I see is when people tend to do this is they tend to hold the chisel from the handle again, and then they're trying to position the tool up from above here, and then they're giving it a whack down like so. All right, to try and remove the material out of that. Okay. Again, when it comes to your chiseling, you want to be holding it in the correct manner so that it gives you better control with what you're working with. Okay, so what you want to tend to do is you want to tend to hold the chisel as if you're holding a pencil. And now I'm right-handed, so what I tend to do is I hold the chisel in my opposite hand that I'm usually work with, all right? Because I usually would use the mallet for a bit of power behind it. So I hold the chisel in my left hand like so. Now what I would tend to do here is I would tend to have it so that I've got the bevel facing into the joint that I want to work with. And if you're lining it up on top like that, onto your groove, like so, all right, and you want to position it so that you're having the chisel perfectly nice and straight. Okay, so depending on where you're standing or how you're standing, if you're standing too up above it or standing sideways, or if you're having your chisel this way, all right, and you're facing it that way, there's no way in determining and telling how the chisel is going to be in terms of, do you want to be straight down? All right, I want the edge of this joint to be perfectly at 90 degrees. So that's why you need to make sure, if I want to pair this off, is I'm positioning my chisel in like that, and I'm looking straight forward into the chisel, so I'm looking the same direction as you. Coming from that direction, you can see that my chisel is now perfectly straight and level. I don't want to be having it off at an angle either way, having it up nice and straight, and then I could start to hit down with my chisel there to clean up my edge, okay, and removing that across to the next part. Again, lining it up, making sure that I got it nice and perfectly straight. I'm working that straight down to try and get a nice clean cut. As you can see here, I'm managing to get a nice smooth clean cut, and it's at 90 degrees coming down straight there. Okay, so positioning your chisel is vitally important in terms of cleaning up or paring off your joint, is having it perfectly straight and level. So your eyesight also includes in this. Okay, third principle or fundamental to think about when you are chiseling is we all tend to use the vise to hold our material to allow us to do certain chiseling cutting procedures, and cutting across my material to try and clean out the bottom of this joint, for instance, is a perfectly acceptable thing to do with having your wood in the vise. Okay, however, if I wanted to clean this shoulder, I've already cleaned this one out. If I wanted to clean that shoulder out in the vise like so, if I position my chisel on top of the wood to clean out the shoulder, and I start giving a wee hit with a mallet, what tends to happen as you're doing this is you can see that your wood starts to drop into the vise, and then you end up trying to do this whole battle between putting your wood back in the right position and tightening the vise nice and tight again to try and get it working again, and it's a constant back and forth depending on what you're doing. Okay. Equally, if I try a different method of using the vise and having it in up here, all right, I've got quite a large of my material sticking out above the vise. If I try and work to get this cut across, it cuts better because the wood is not kind of dropping down into the vise, but there's a little bit of play, all right, in the wood as I'm trying to hit that across. So I'm not getting the same amount of power behind it. I'm having to hit the mallet a bit harder by using the mallet to cut across into my material because it's sticking out and there's that level of play in the wood itself. Okay, so a more beneficial way of chiseling that part out of my material is having it clamped down to something solid like a workbench. All right, the thickness of the workbench, something solid. And what it means is as I hit this down, there's a lot less effort I'm needing to put into the mallet to allow this to cut. Because the wood is on a solid surface, it's taking that impact very well, and it actually cuts through the wood a lot easier to get you a nice clean joint edge. Okay, so having that solid surface is something quite good to have, is by clamping your wood down onto a surface like the workbench rather than having it in the vise. Okay, something else to consider is about being efficient with your chiseling to try and improve your accuracy. What I mean by this is I've got my shoulder here that I've just extended back a little bit, and it's quite a lot. I mean, there's about 4 or 5 mil on there that I want to take off to get back to my line. Is if I'm trying to chisel that out to get to the shoulder, it's about, if I try and take off too much, all right, if I try and take all this off in one go, I'm just going to place my chisel on the line itself, about there, nice and straight, and work that straight down. All right, now it is taking it off, but it's requiring a lot more effort than is actually needed for me to try and get that off, okay? And also, it's just about gone slightly beyond the line here, okay? The reason for that is, despite me lining my chisel up on the line itself of what I wanted to do, because there's quite a large area of wood at the front of it, the bevel that's here, not only is it going straight down, but it's pushing itself back towards this way. So it's going not only down, but it's going towards that way as well, which can sometimes lead to you chiseling slightly beyond your mark. Okay, so when you want to chisel this bit out, it's about taking basically a small bit off at a time. All right, if you take the front end of this bit here, all right, you'll notice that it's a lot less effort for you having to chisel that out. All right, a lot less effort. But also it just means you can just slowly work your way back to the line you want to go to. All right, and when you do eventually get back to the line, because I had a lot less, I took a small amount of material off each time, I haven't gone beyond the mark there. I can still see my pencil or pen mark there on the edge of the wood. Okay, because there's less material in front of the chisel, which means it's not pushing the chisel not only down, but backwards into my material that I want to keep. Okay, another thing to worry about in terms of taking less off with your chisel is I've got an inch chisel here at the moment, is if I want to take this off, it's about, rather than trying to use the full length of the chisel to take out a big solid chunk, okay, it's maybe taking a small chunk at a time.